All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do is talk with webmasters and publishers like the ones here in the Hangout, or the few here in the Hangout. So if you're watching this, there's still room for you too. As always, if any of you have any questions to start off with, feel free to jump on in.
Hey John, since last time you kind of cut me with my question, can I continue from there and ask it now?
Okay, go for it.
I already posted in Hangout, you can see it there, I used your name. Here I will use another one. So let's presume my name is Bill Gates, and I'm a billionaire. And I have a domain gates.com. And sometime in the past, I used the subdomain bill.gates.com for my site. I posted a fair share of articles and general academic papers, got a fair share of high-quality links from universities, from research institutes, from country academies, from newspapers like BBC, CNN. So it was a good site, it was ranking well, everything was fine. Then at some point I just stopped using it altogether. Bad thing, I know, but what's done is done. And for a couple years I just didn't use it. The domain was always active, but at some point there was no content on it. At some point even hosting was dropped. Now I decided to start posting again, start using it again. Just that I moved it on gates.com without Bill. My question is, what's the best approach to salvage whatever I can salvage from the popularity of the old domain, from the links it had at that point, things like that. What I have now is a site-wide 301 redirect. So every page on bill.gates.com redirects to the homepage of gates.com. But I suspect it's not the best approach. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, good question. So if you have the same content from before, then that might be an option.
I have some of the content, not all of it. I have some new content.
Yeah. I think to some extent, if you can put the content back online, that would be useful. The 301 redirect to the homepage probably isn't helping that much for search, because we will see that as a soft 404. So we will see that all of these pages disappeared and that they're now pointing at the homepage. So we assume that those pages just don't exist anymore. We will drop them from our index.
So where I should have 301 one-to-one redirect from old URL to the new URL with same content on the new site. Yeah. And for the page I don't have anymore, leave it as redirect to homepage. Or?
Yeah, I think the other aspect there is also that to some extent this looks like a domain that was dropped and picked up by someone else then. And
no, it was always on my name. It was never dropped.
Okay. If it just wasn't being hosted, then usually that's something where at least part of the previous value will be kind of retained. But if you drop the domain name in between, you forgot to pay for it, and it kind of expired for a couple of years.
Paid for it, nothing like that.
Okay, then I assume that's something where at least some of that value will kind of be retained. Of course, not all of it will probably live during that time, because we will see this as being gone, and at some point we'll say, oh, we don't really have any signals anymore for that old content. But some signals will be retained and will kind of live on with the new website that's there then. But that's something where there will be a big difference with how it was before and how it is now. I mean, there's always a difference when you look at something over several years, but a lot of the existing value will probably not be there anymore.
I see. But still the best bet would be, where possible, to do a one-to-one 301 redirect.
Yes, definitely. So the 301 redirect from all pages to the home page, that would be something that we would see as a soft 404.
I see. I do it mostly for people who might enter directly from links. What's the first thing? But okay, thank you a lot.
Sure.
And somehow related to what you said about the domain not being dropped and being registered all the time. Somehow a question about this is an old myth I was hearing years back. Does it matter if a domain is registered for a long time in advance? Is a trust sign for Google, or it doesn't matter if you pay for 2 years or it's paid for 20 years in advance?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for us.
Okay, so just a myth. Never mattered.
I don't think it ever mattered, yeah.
Okay, thank you a lot.
Sure. All right. Anyone else want to ask a question before I jump into the submitted ones?
Hey, John.
Hi.
Hey, calling from UK. Really quick question, John, regarding products, ranking them for color variations. How do we make so basically we can't create different color variation products on our website, and we want to rank for different color variation products. How do we do that? I mean, we can't create unique content. I work for the telecommunication industry. So for instance, with Apple, we can't create unique content for every product. What do we do? Is there anything we can do? Similarly with new Google Pixel phone as well. We've got different color variations. We can't do anything with that. Is there anything you will be introducing very soon? I did reach you out on Twitter asking you about if we can use something like rel next, rel previous, or anything else. I don't know. Can you help?
So I think to a big extent, this is something where you probably don't need to do anything special. So if you have a product page and you have the different variations listed there, then we'll be able to pick that up from that product page directly. I usually recommend to make separate pages if there's really something unique that you're offering there that people are explicitly looking for. So if people are explicitly looking for, I don't know, a pink iPhone with a certain model number, and that's something that's very different from all the other iPhone models that are out there, then that's something it might make sense to have a separate page for, but then you would also have unique content for it as well. You'd have kind of explaining why this is pink and glow in the dark, or whatever is kind of unique about this specific model. So that's something where if you do have something that you want to list as something separate and you want it to rank for that separate thing, then I would create separate pages for it. On the other hand, if it's just an attribute of an existing kind of product, if it's like the shoe is available in these 5 sizes and these 3 colors, then that's something I would just mention on the product, on the normal product page itself. So the thing that's always happening there is you're balancing between having a strong product page where you have one page for these different variations and kind of diluting that content and separating it out into multiple variation pages where each of these variation pages will have a lot more trouble to rank because we have to rank it separately. So that's something where if you do have something unique and compelling to offer as a one specific variation, then fine, that can maybe rank by itself. But otherwise, I would recommend more to concentrate things into one really strong product page.
Okay. I mean, you know, we've tried everything. It's not really possible to rank or write unique content. As you know, Google or Apple doesn't allow us to change the content. It's strictly the same content. We can't change the name of the product. We can't change anything. So the reviews can't be changed because there's no technology out there to send different reviews to different products. And okay, we'll try to do something around that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you can't make something unique for that specific variation, I would just fold it into the normal product page, and people searching for that variation, they will still be able to find that product page. So that's something where if you can't do something unique and special for that specific variation, then really make a strong product page instead, because that can still rank. You still have the attributes listed there as well. So if someone is searching for an iPhone in pink, then you have that kind of that match of those two phrases there anyway.
Okay. So mentioning it quite a few times would help then.
Well, quite a few times kind of turns into keyword stuffing.
No, not anyway.
So it's not something where like the number of times that you mention it there would be relevant, but more kind of this is a really strong product page in the end, and it's available in these different variations. So you might have, I don't know, the 64 megabyte or 64 gigabyte, 128 gigabyte, or whatever different versions of the device there. And for all of those variations, you wouldn't make separate pages because it's essentially just an attribute of that product.
Okay. All right then. Thanks so much.
Are you saying, sorry, are you saying you can't update the content on a product page, or you're not allowed because the manufacturer dictates
because of
the description? But they don't stop you writing extra content, do they?
They do.
So it's just a feed of descriptions that you're not allowed to change.
They give us content, and you can't do anything with the content. You can't change it completely. They take full ownership of the product page. Yes, you can add reviews to it, but you can't change any word, any image, nothing.
Right.
And they expect you to have the content on top of the image as part of the image rather than crawlable content. But we try to adjust that. I mean, we try to add more content on top of the image. We do play with that, but it's very strict when it comes to Apple, or Google is following them as well. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess that makes it a lot harder. Or on the other hand, it also means that if you're creative in a way that is allowed, then maybe that's one way to differentiate yourself. So I don't know, maybe write like a blog post about this product pointing at the detail page. That might be an option as well, where that blog post could rank for something unique that you're talking about with regards to this product, and it goes to your product detail page where you do provide kind of the required information.
So yeah, okay, cool, thanks. So improve the internal link structure. Yeah. Okay, cool, thanks.
John, if I can give an example on how we handle that.
Okay.
So we have a few customers on Magento platform, and they actually required to have different URLs for each variation for, I don't know, Google Shopping, maybe Google AdWords, or some sort of advertising campaign. And what we do is on the main product page, which is a configurable product in Magento, where you can have a drop down and select the size or maybe the color, whatever the attribute is, we mention available sizes or available colors, and all of the variations we use a rel canonical back to the configurable product page. So that helps us have one single page, unique URL to fold all of the signals to, and also allows the advertisers to use those unique URLs for each variations for different purposes. So if that's an option, I guess that's pretty okay. And mentioning the available whatever attribute is also would help with searches for that.
Thanks, Mihai. We do very similar stuff as well, but technically it's not very possible with lots of websites, with huge websites other than Magento. Of course, they're big e-commerce website, but anyway, we'll try to do something. We'll try to find out a way, maybe write some blog posts around those topics, and then speak to Apple maybe or Google.
Well, I mean, if everyone else has to use exactly the same content, then that gives you room to be maybe creative in other ways. Yeah. So that's I really don't know what the requirements are there and what kind of limitations they might have in that regard.
Okay, no worries. Thanks so much.
Sure. All right. Let me go through some of the questions that were submitted. As always, if you have comments or questions in between, feel free to jump on in. And we'll try to get some more time towards the end for any further questions that you might have. OK, how long does it take for all 200 ranking signals in the algorithm to be refreshed? So for instance, if I update my website now, how long will it take until everything is updated? We don't actually have any specific time frame for like everything being updated. These are, to a big extent, these are things that are all running in parallel and all running kind of in different cycles. So some of these update very quickly. Some of these take a little bit longer to be updated. So it's not something where there's a simple, like a monthly basis where we would say everything is updated at the first of the month. It really depends a lot. And it also depends a bit on the website itself, how often we crawl individual pages from that website, in the sense that some pages on every website are crawled very frequently, sometimes every couple of minutes even. We use those to kind of update things that we think are fast changing. And a lot of pages on most websites are crawled very infrequently. That might be several months in between, or maybe even up to a year. So when you look at something like that for a website, even just from crawling the content, it can take anywhere from several minutes to a couple of months for that to even be updated on our side. And the various algorithms that we have, they do try to be fast in responding to what's out there on the web. But some of them are fast, some of them are a bit slower, some of them like to take into account more of the history of what has been changing there. So there is no easy time or easy answer for you with regards to when will everything kind of take into account what my current status is now. We're struggling to make our category pages rank apart from the usual title tags, H1 tags on page content. Is there any area where we should be putting our efforts in? Is it content? Should we be doing link building? Anything else? So this is something that depends a lot, I think, on the website itself as well. In that sometimes category pages are useful for users, and sometimes category pages are less useful for users. And from our point of view, we try to show category pages that are useful and relevant to users in the appropriate search results, but we use almost all of the different category pages to discover the actual products themselves. So if you're linking to the individual products on your website from a category page, then we will follow those links and learn about those products in any case, and we'll try to rank those products appropriately. Whether or not it makes sense for us to rank the category pages themselves instead of the product pages, for example, that's a different question. For some sites, there is a lot of really useful content on a category page where there's information about like the type of product that this is, or some background information. Then that's something that might be really useful to show. But it's not the case that I would say every type of category page needs to show up in the search results. Every type of category page has a problem if it's not ranking well in the search results. That really depends a lot on the page itself. And doing things like title tags, H1 tags, I think those are good things to do in any case. But just by having those elements on a page doesn't mean that a category page is suddenly relevant for users. I added some text from some customer testimonials to our depot pages. Should we also be adding the relevant link to the third-party review site showing that customer's testimonial? And if so, would you follow or no follow it? What benefits does having reviews have in terms of algorithms and rankings? So I guess there are two aspects there that are kind of relevant when it comes to search. On the one hand, any testimonial or review is text that we can pick up and we can show in search results appropriately, or that we can use for rankings or better understanding the relevance of the page. That's sometimes really useful because customer reviews, they just tend to describe the product or the service that they're reviewing in their own words in ways that you might not be describing on your official product page. So I think that's at least one aspect that can be really useful, in the sense that this gives you a little bit more content, that Google can pick up and use for search itself. With regards to linking to the review site, that's something you can definitely do. I wouldn't worry so much about followed or no followed link there, provided this is not something that's a requirement from the review site. So if you think this is relevant content and you want to point your users at it, then feel free to do that. The other aspect when it comes to reviews is that sometimes we can use these for rich snippets, so the kind of the star ratings in the search results. That doesn't really apply to testimonials because that's not really kind of like a collection of reviews, but rather a hand-picked set or hand-picked individual review that you're taking out. But if you're using reviews in general, then that might be an option for you as well. We have a search box on our e-commerce site, and I currently set this to return no index, follow pages when an item is searched. Is that correct, or should we be doing no index, no follow? If so, what should we do there? So search pages are really useful for us because we can use them to discover your individual products. This is particularly true if you use kind of like category pages as search pages, because then we can kind of understand what the category is about and find links to the individual products. On the other hand, if this is just a search page where you have a search box on top and people have to always enter a term into the search box to get results, then usually that's less of something that's useful for us to discover new content, because we'd have to go through and kind of figure out what we have to enter in your search box in order to get something useful out of your website. So that's something where I think no index definitely would make sense. With regards to no follow or not, that's more of a question in my mind with regards to navigation within the search page itself, and less with regards to linking to the individual product. So the links to the product is definitely useful for us, but probably the navigation, if you have like a multi-page layout, if you have separate filters, that's something that's less useful for us in search, and that might be something you could no follow. In general, in our Webmaster Guidelines, we recommend that people block search pages from being indexed. So the no index is definitely the right approach here. If you're finding that Google is going to those search pages and submitting a lot of search requests that is putting a load on your server that you don't really have the capacity to handle, then maybe even blocking the whole search section in robots text would also be an option there. But again, kind of no index is kind of a good baseline. Robots text is an option if you're kind of seeing a load on your server that's too high. And with regards to no follow, I would use that for the navigation within the kind of the search form itself, but not necessarily for the links to the individual items that you're kind of providing there.
Well, why does Google recommend stopping itself from indexing via the search? Is it just a resource issue or duplicate content, or what's the? Yeah, so I haven't read that guideline.
I think there are two aspects there. On the one hand, these pages tend to be kind of lower quality, and that if we were to show them in the search results, that could look really weird. On the other hand, we easily get stuck in search pages and start kind of like just bombarding the server with requests that don't really point to any useful content. So that's something where I think for both of those aspects, we've gotten better over the years, and it's less of a problem, but it's still something where you might want to watch out for and kind of help Google to focus on the real content rather than on like bombarding your server with search requests. OK, I have a page with great external links, and that page receives traffic from search, but I want to no-index it because I think it's not that high quality and I can't improve that content. Does this decrease the positive impact of that link on my domain if the link page is no-indexed but followed? So it seems like a weird situation in that people are linking to that content, but you don't think it's good enough for your website. So my general recommendation there would be to think about what you could do to actually improve that content so that you can at least work with it in a normal way with those good links to that content and it being shown in search. So that's kind of my first recommendation there. With regards to no indexing a page and having that link be forwarded, that's something that would generally happen there. On the other hand, if we see that this page is no indexed for a really long time and it starts to look more like a 404 page rather than actually that you're forwarding something there, then that might result in us just dropping that page from our index and saying, well, you really don't want this page indexed, therefore we will drop it, and therefore anything that's kind of linking to that page will also be dropped. So if you really want to remove that page from your website and you have something equivalent that's useful instead of that page, then maybe setting up a redirect would be a better approach there. But again, kind of going back to the beginning, this is something where I would think about what you could do to really just improve the quality of that page so that you don't have to kind of do these crazy hacks to keep those links being useful. How good is Googlebot reading web pages correctly? As when I run my website through a validator, it's saying there are over 120 HTML errors. Apart from crawl rate, could this affect rankings either directly or indirectly? So the good news is most of the web is broken, and we've gotten kind of used to that. So I mean, I don't know. Good news. That's kind of a bad way of phrasing it almost. But you're not alone. There are lots of pages out there that do have broken HTML on them, and we show them perfectly in the search results. So to a big extent, we have to deal with what's out there, and we have to be able to process that and show those pages normally. And I don't think for most types of HTML errors that you would see any negative effect at all. So not even on the crawl rate, not on the rankings themselves, directly or indirectly. There are, of course, issues where when the HTML page is so broken that users can't actually use it, then that is something that you would definitely see an indirect effect from. But if it's just broken in subtle ways where, like, semantically or technically it's just not correct, but the whole web page itself works properly, then that's less of an issue. The one place where I do notice these issues causing problems is when you're working with structured data. So if you have structured data on your website that you really, really want Google to be able to process and pull out, then having valid HTML makes sure that we can pull that out. Whereas if the HTML is broken in a way that we see some structured data like opening here and we don't see the closing, or we don't see the individual attributes of that piece of structured data properly because the HTML is breaking in between, then we might not be able to pick that up. That's mostly an issue with regards to rich snippets and less of an issue with regards to ranking, though. The other aspect where I have every now and then seeing pages run into problems with broken HTML is when the head of the page is actually broken. So not so much the normal HTML errors that revolve around the body of the page, but if the head of the HTML page is broken, then what can happen is our systems might say, oh, the head is actually closing here because there's something broken, and everything after this implied close of the head will be seen as a part of the body. So things like robots meta tags or hreflang might not be picked up properly because they're in that part of the head that we perceive as being part of the body. So this is kind of, in a way, also structured data and metadata on a page that if you really want to rely on that working, then make sure that at least the head part of the page is working properly. My website is currently using HTML version 4. Is there any benefit to going to HTML version 5 and tagging up the header, footer, content, even though we already use schema.org? Can this help with rankings? I suspect there are benefits of moving to HTML5, but they don't affect Google search. So whether or not you're on HTML, I don't know, 2, 3, or 4, or XHTML, or HTML5, that's all something that we kind of have to deal with and pull that content out of there in a normal way, and it shouldn't affect rankings. So just for search itself, I wouldn't necessarily move to HTML5. Of course, there are lots of other reasons that you might want to move to HTML5 or move some things to HTML5. But at least for search itself, that's not something where you'd have to do that. We noticed we have more internal links pointing to our contact us and terms and conditions and about us pages as opposed to our category pages, which are the ones that we want Google to see the most. Should we be looking at changing this so that we have more links going to the categories? I think this happened because contact us are situated in both the nav and the footer. The good news is we kind of like with broken HTML, a lot of websites have contact us and terms and conditions and about us pages, and we deal with that normally. It's something that we see linked within a lot of web pages. Within a website, usually it's linked from every page, so there's no need to do kind of this PageRank sculpting that was in, I don't know, half a decade ago, where people would use no-follow links pointing to the About Us page because it's not that important. That's something that our algorithms can deal with really well already. So you don't really need to do anything special there. You don't need to change the URLs around and change the contact us page to be a category page or anything crazy like that. So we generally would pick up the links to these individual pages, maybe the contact us page, and from there, if you have a normal navigation on your website, then we can forward that PageRank, those signals, to the other pages on your website and try to rank those appropriately. So it's not something that you'd need to kind of artificially kind of force Google to kind of devalue your contact us page and recognize your other pages as being more important in a relative sense. So I would just keep that set up. Make sure that your navigation works really well. Make sure that your important category pages are linked properly from the rest of your website so that people can get there very quickly. And we should be able to pick that up from there. Our articles on our blog section can also be accessed by selecting to view articles for particular months. For example, show me all articles from September 2016. Should this be a no index, no follow, as it's almost like an attribute or a sort, or can something like this affect rankings? Usually, I wouldn't bother with doing anything special for a page like that. If you think it doesn't make sense to index like that, I would just put a no index on it. But it's not something that I'd say would be a critical thing or that it would visibly affect your search rankings if you changed your monthly archive pages to no index or something like that. So I would definitely not change it to no follow because it's useful for us to actually pick up the individual articles that you're linking from those pages.
Can I follow up with a question here?
Sure.
It's about the same thing. A blog and you kind of have a lot of duplicate content of a blog. You have posts themselves, you have a main page with pagination, then you have category pages, you have archive on dates, on months. You have author pages, so pretty much every content is in 5-6 places at least. And you can do canonical because except the article itself, the other one contains more than one article. In my case, I use the full article, not an excerpt. But anyway, it's not a one-to-one relation. So pretty much it's kind of a lot of duplicate content. I used, in this case, Noindex on everything except the main page and the articles themselves. Is that okay, or somehow that's better?
No, I think that's perfectly fine. One thing I try to make sure is that the individual article pages themselves do have something unique by themselves as well. So you can control this a little bit if you're using an extract on the category, on the listing pages, and the full text on the kind of the article itself. Or if you have a lot of comments, then that, of course, is also a differentiation where we would see, well, this has the article, and the other kind of the blog post itself has the article and all of these comments that have additional value there.
That's a second question about comments.
Okay.
Let's say my articles, which are mostly academic, are quite high quality. Do not say very high quality. There are 3,000 words and more with a lot of research, with links to relevant resources. They are unique. They're really good. Now there are comments. Comments are now really spammy or low quality because those I delete right away. But there are obviously lower quality than research for which you worked weeks or months to write. Does Google is able to make difference between the real content and the comments, or they just take it that since the comments are on the page, that what I published as a whole and kind of lowers the quality of the page as a whole?
Yeah, that's always a good question. So to a large part, we look at these pages overall. So we try not to differentiate between the comments and the main body of the page. We do understand that sometimes there's user-generated content on these pages, and that's something that we might need to handle a little bit differently. But for the most part, we look at these pages as a whole, and we think that you're the one who's publishing this page, and if these comments are on your page, then that's something that you want to have associated with your page. So if you kind of have this mismatch of a really high quality article with a lot of really low quality comments on it.
Not really low, just average quality comments.
Just to exaggerate. So I think that's something where our algorithms will be partially confused, and they will get mixed signals, and they will see this is really great, and this is like lots of people just saying thanks, nice post, and then they drop a link or something like that. So
it would be better to block them for comments, somehow hide them.
I think that's totally up to you. I mean, it's your web page, and you can choose what you want to have shown on your web page. So that's kind of up to you. If you want to have all of these comments on there, maybe that makes sense. If you want to say, well, I will just highlight a few comments and I will move everything else to something like a forum section or a separate page or something that loads separately, then that might also be an option.
But doing something like I leave some of a comment which I consider most relevant and high quality, and the other one I hide behind click here to expand. Would Google still follow that or not?
If the click here to expand section just uses CSS, if the content itself is already loaded, then we would probably see that.
No, I could do something like lazy loading.
Yeah, if you use lazy loading, if you use Ajax, something to pull it from the server, then Googlebot wouldn't see that because we don't click on individual items on a page to see what actually happens.
So that would be probably the best approach. Still have the best comments to have more content, still have everyone available to the user to read, and
That sounds like a good approach. I mean, if you have enough comments to be able to do this, and if you do have some really high quality comments that you want to highlight, or for example, if you know that certain posters always provide really good comments, then that's a great approach to do.
Okay, thank you a lot.
Sure. All right. Can our crawling budget suffer if we have a lot of no-index, no-follow pages on our website? We want for the robot not to crawl unnecessary pages, technical aggregated content pages, pages with no products or offer, and to put the crawling budget into important pages. But it seems that important pages don't get any budget increase. Googlebot just starts crawling fewer pages instead. So for the most part, most websites don't really need to worry about the crawling budget. That's something where pretty much all websites that are hosted on a reasonable server, we can crawl enough from this website to really pick up all of the new and changed content. So that's something where you generally don't need to kind of force Google to crawl some of this less and some of this more. If crawling is really a problem on your website, then on the one hand, robots text can help to kind of guide us. On the other hand, most often this is an issue with regards to the URL structure itself. So if you have a lot of URL parameters in there, if you have a weird rewriting scheme that a lot of different URLs lead to the same content, then that's something where crawling will be a problem for us. But if you have a normal website setup with a reasonable number of URLs on your website, and we can crawl through those properly, your server is fast enough for your users, then usually that's less of a problem. The other thing also to keep in mind is that crawling more doesn't mean it will rank higher. So crawling for us is more of a technical baseline thing that we have to do to pick up the content. It's not something that we would say is a requirement for your site to rank really well. So something that we crawl very infrequently can still rank very high. And similarly, something that we crawl a lot doesn't necessarily rank higher. So there's no need to artificially increase the crawling of a website if there's nothing new or changed on your website that we actually need to pick up. All our customer websites, which we build on our own, are using a footer area, a link to the main page of our company where the users can see our services, etc. What do you think? Should we set that link to no follow because it looks for Google unnatural? Or do you say there's a problem with that? So I guess it depends a bit on the configuration here. If these are your websites and you're linking to kind of like your main company website, and this is a handful of websites, then usually that's less of a problem. That's not something where we would worry about whether or not this is followed or no followed. On the other hand, if you're a web developer and you're putting out thousands of websites and all of them are required to have this followed link for best website designer to your main company website, then that does start looking really kind of fishy to us. On the one hand, algorithmically. On the other hand, also for the web spam team when they look at your website and kind of the links to that website. So that's kind of the main difference I would look at there is this really just a handful of sites where you're linking to from your website to your main other website? Or is this a large collection of sites that you're putting out for other people where they're required to keep this link to your website? And if other people are required to keep a link to your website in exchange for work or services that you do, then this is a paid link anyway. So that's something that I generally recommend just doing a no-follow there, because users can still click on that link and they can go to your website and see the services that you provide. But for Google, at least, it's clear that this is something, that link is not there because that specific website kind of editorially placed that link, but rather because you put that there and you gave them the website to put up. Are site links related to site quality? Let's say my homepage and also specific pages get site links. Does it tell that the website or the page is higher quality? Do site links appear only for navigational queries? I I think to some extent there's probably a quality aspect there in that we don't show site links for any random website, but for a big extent it's really a matter of making it easier for users to find the specific content on a site. So if you're entering like the name of a really big website and you see it in the search results, but actually what you wanted was this specific part of that website, then that's something that we might say it might make sense to actually show site links there. So it really kind of depends on the type of website, what we think is relevant for users, and how we can extract kind of the structure of the website and make it easier for users to reach the right pages. So it's not something I would say is kind of like a badge of honor that your website is really, really high quality, but rather people are looking for the specific piece of content on your website, so we want to make sure that they can actually find that piece of content as quickly as possible. We're a motorhome rental business. Is it a problem if we use the word rental or synonyms to that in our internal linking? Can this give a ranking benefit, provided we don't overdo it? Let me just mute you for a second. So it's perfectly fine to use kind of what your business does for internal links. The one thing I would just watch out for is, like you mentioned, provided you don't overdo it. This is something where sometimes sites kind of drift into the area that they're actually more keyword stuffing rather than that they're providing additional value for users when they're using your website. So if people are going to your website and they want to rent a motorhome and you have a link on your homepage that says rent a motorhome, then that's really useful. That's not something that you'd need to kind of obfuscate or hide in any way. On the other hand, if you have 200 different motorhome models to rent and all of them are rent motorhome model this, rent motorhome model this, then suddenly when we look at that page, we see, oh, rent motorhome is something that's repeated so often on this page, we can probably ignore most of those. And that's when you're drifting into this kind of keyword stuffing area instead. So I would look at it with your users, make sure it works really well for your users. And for the most part, if users can deal with it and can kind of understand what your page is about with the links that you're providing, then that's something that we can use as well. And that's usually not overdoing it in a case like that. We recovered from an unnatural links penalty almost 2 years ago. Since then, we have made big improvements to our site in all areas, including content, design, user experience, etc. However, there's been no improvement in rankings. What else can we try, as both SEOs and people from the forum don't seem to know why? Can it still be a trust issue with Google? Or can you give some tips as to what we need to look at that could be affecting things? It's really hard to say without looking at the website itself and kind of seeing what all has been happening there. In general, if you've recovered from a manual action, like an unnatural links action in this case, then that manual action will no longer be affecting your website at all. So from a manual kind of point of view, if you've resolved that, then that's resolved. Some websites, when they had web spam issues, like for instance, unnatural links, also had issues with the Penguin algorithm, for example. And that has updated in the meantime. So you should be seeing some changes there as well, if that was an issue with regards to your website from back then. It's really hard to kind of come up with general advice on what you could do to improve things without looking at the website itself. So one thing you could do is post a link to your forum thread in the comments to the event, and I can follow that and kind of look into more of what has been happening there and kind of double check that things are working well on our side as well, or if there's something totally obvious that somehow people have missed there. My SEO told me that when a searcher stops searching on my site and can find what he was looking for, it makes my page rank higher and higher quality. Is that true? Is that better for my search rankings, or should I fire my SEO? That kind of escalated quickly. In general, Google doesn't know what people are doing on your website. We don't use things like Google Analytics, so we don't really know like what all is happening there. We do kind of see the indirect effects, though. So if people are going to your website and they're recommending it to other people, then we can take those recommendations, if they're links, and apply them to your website and use that to kind of help increase rankings. And similarly, if people are going to your website and they think it's a terrible website and they go back, and they're not going to be recommending your website, and it's probably a sign that your website isn't that high quality, or that you need to do something to improve that. So it's not so much a matter of this being a direct SEO ranking factor, but rather as something kind of as an indirect signal for you to kind of understand, do I need to do something significantly on my website, or am I kind of in a reasonable place? So if people are going to your site and they can find what they're looking for, they can get the answers that they're looking for, then that seems like a pretty reasonable state to be in. On the other hand, if you see people going to your website and they just bounce off immediately without looking at your content, without kind of looking at other things on your website, then usually that's a sign that there's something you need to improve there. And from Google's point of view, this kind of bounce thing isn't so much of a problem, but the indirect effects definitely are. So that's something where I wouldn't necessarily fire the SEO right away for recommending something like that, but I would use that less of an SEO signal and more of a general quality signal for your website. Let me just kind of refresh this and see if I can get to the page itself again. OK, in Search Console, you have an option to see content keywords, and some words are showing a full bar, implying that we use the word a lot. Could this ever imply over-optimization? For example, if we sell BMW cars and the word BMW car is showing a full bar in the keyword list. So I need to talk with the Search Console team that we actually remove this feature, because I think it's really misleading, and kind of similarly here as well, in that this feature takes into account the number of times that these words were found on the web page, but they don't mean that this is indicative of any specific problem. So I think this is useful if you see things like pharmaceuticals listed there and you know your website is not about pharmaceuticals, because that's a sign that probably your website has been hacked. But if you're seeing normal content keywords there, then the bar and the rankings on that page, I don't think are kind of relevant for anything with regards to search. So it doesn't mean that if those words are on top of the list, that your page is always about that and it will rank really well for that. Similarly, it doesn't mean that you're overdoing it. So this is something where I would use this report as kind of a guidance to understand that Google has seen those words on your page. But I wouldn't use it as a way of understanding that Google thinks my page is relevant about these topics. So if you think this is kind of like over-optimization, then that's something you could look at on the pages individually and think about, well, am I keyword stuffing here? Am I overdoing it? If I took the text on my web page and read it aloud to a customer on the phone, would they think I'm crazy, or would they see this as kind of being normal text? So that's kind of a general guideline I'd use there, and not specifically kind of focus too much on this specific report, because at some point we should kind of get rid of it. I think it causes a bit more confusion than is actually necessary. All right, let me just take maybe one or two more questions. I have a bit more time afterwards, so if you have more questions, feel free to jump on in then. Let's see. Competitor has a few small sites, which has a site-wide optimized footer, anchor text link in their footers pointing to their main money site from the small mini sites. This tactic has been working well for them for a really long time. Is this allowed, or would you call this a PBN? Do you want us to PM you the URL to check? And you can pass it on to the relevant teams. Having specifics is always useful to kind of look at. It kind of goes into what we talked about before. If you have a link to your main website in your footer, then to some extent, that's not necessarily a problem. On the other hand, if you're doing this in a big scale, then that could become a problem. So I'm happy to take a quick look at this, but I can't promise that we will take your competitor out of the search results and you will rank #1 instead. So again, I'm happy to take a look if you want to send me the details, though. Let's see. I can see we still have a rel publisher tag when I use view source. I understand you don't use it anymore. Could us having it in still cause any harm? And would you recommend leaving it or removing it? It definitely doesn't cause any harm. I don't actually know what we do with the rel publisher tag at the moment. I believe that was actually only for the Google Plus side to link your official Google Plus page to your website. So not something that we would use in search anyway. But tags like this or rel author tags, if you have those on your website, they don't cause any problems. You can definitely leave them there. There's no rush to remove these things if they're no longer used. If we run across tags that we don't use, we just ignore them. They don't cause any problems. We implemented structured data on our pages, but Google Search Console shows that Google recognizes about 10% of our structured data. Though from the Search Analytics report, I can see there are much more pages which had rich snippets displayed in the search results. Which report is lying? Oh, God, this is good. Yeah, escalating quickly again. So from I think the structured data report is one of those reports that looks at a significant sample of your website. It doesn't look at the whole website overall. This generally makes sense because we try to filter out things like duplicate content. So if you have URLs with multiple URLs, or pages with multiple URLs leading to the same page itself, then otherwise the structured data report would just blow up, and we would show there are like infinite URLs that are broken, when actually it's just one page that is broken, and it just has a lot of different URLs that we've discovered from crawling your website. So this is something where the absolute numbers themselves don't necessarily match the absolute numbers of indexed URLs. On the other hand, the errors that are listed there, they can be kind of relevant as well to kind of figure out which part of the pages are not being picked up properly for structured data. So I guess if you wanted to ask which report was lying, it's probably more the structured data report, but not lying in the sense that it's misleading you, but rather that it's trying to give you a relevant sample of the content, the information that we have, to make it useful for you so that it's something you can actually work with rather than just a big pile of data that you have to sort through on your own. OK, looks like there's one question in the Hangout comments. We're an agency who do develop websites for international cinema chains worldwide, and Google is currently direct linking traffic to third-party booking sites for movie showtimes, bypassing our cinema's direct booking, and our clients are missing out on considerable booking revenue as a result. How do we ensure Google includes our client sites as a link to book in the movie times results in the one box? I don't know. I would have to look at the details there. So this is something, if you can send me some specifics with regards to some sample sites, some queries where you're seeing this happening, I can definitely take that up with the team here and see what we can do there. In general, when it comes to things like movie showtimes, it's often a lot easier for us to work with bigger feed providers, where we can partner with them directly and kind of make sure that the data quality is high quality, and that we don't have to work with all of these small individual providers individually, because sometimes that makes it hard to really ensure that the data is useful and relevant. But I'm happy to look at some specifics and talk with the team about that.
John, what's the best way to get in touch with you regarding that?
Just send me a note on Google+, and I can forward that on to the team.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
John, can I ask a quick Penguin question?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So I don't know if you remember this. We had this local client that's been demoted by Penguin for 3 years now. So for the main keyword, they never were better than, I don't know, third or fourth page in the results, which for Google.ro is pretty bad. And it's the kind of niche where that keyword kind of brings them 80% of the traffic and revenue. And on Wednesday, we kind of went straight to the first page, which kind of signaled that the disavow file was taken into consideration and the penalty was removed. Then yesterday, back to the fourth page. And today, apparently, we're back on the first page. So I'm just curious whether this is, or how long it will take before it reaches a steady state of some sort. Or is this about data center propagation or anything like that? Is there anything you could tell us?
It could be a matter of the data centers and where the data is at the moment. That might be something you're seeing there, especially if you're seeing these kind of fluctuations. And usually that just means it takes a little bit of time to kind of settle down again. The other aspect that might also be happening there is that maybe from the Penguin algorithm itself, it's been kind of loosened up and it's ranking a lot better. But that could mean that the other algorithms have to kind of adapt a little bit and kind of shuffle things and understand the new status of the website or the new status of those kind of search results and see how that should settle down. So sometimes you'll see this kind of immediate jump at some point, and then it kind of shuffles back into more of a steady state. And that's not necessarily something from the Penguin side, but just from our various algorithms and the way that they interact.
Right, but do you expect this to, these kind of fluctuations to be long-term, short-term? Do you have any expectations with that?
There will always be fluctuations.
Yeah, but
that doesn't help you.
First, that's a big change, and my client is very on a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah, I don't know. Usually these are the kind of things that settle down fairly quickly. So I would say over the course of a week or so. But like I said, there are always fluctuations in search. There are always changes happening. I can't say that it will stay in this state forever.
Right. So just take our time and see where it goes.
Yeah.
One quick other question regarding redirects. So we have a client that is an e-commerce shop, and on Black Friday they have a Black Friday special deals page, and it's the same URL every year, except when the Black Friday period is over, they redirect that to the main page. They've been doing this for the past 3 or 4 years, and they use a 301 redirect. And close to the Black Friday date, they just remove the redirect and let the page be itself again. I'm not sure how good this is because, for almost 1 year, you see a redirect going to the main page, you transfer all the signals and everything, and then the redirect is gone. And then I'm not sure how that would affect the signals that you have pointing to that Black Friday page. Would a 302 redirect maybe be more appropriate, or what would you suggest?
I suspect there is no perfect answer for that, but a redirect is, I think, a reasonable approach there. A 404 page or a soft 404 page even explicitly might be an approach as well, where you say, well, Black Friday is over, come back in in a year, I guess. That might be an approach. I don't think from a practical point of view, it really matters which of these approaches you do. So that's something where these different options exist. I think we're pretty good at picking up like when a page goes from being redirected to actually having content again, just as we are from picking up when a page goes to being a 404 to actually showing content again. Those are both situations that we can handle fairly well. So I think either of those would kind of work.
The only issue is that, for example, if I'm searching for something regarding Black Friday, the site ranks with the new URL, the one that's been 301 redirected to. I'm just afraid that if we remove this URL, it will take quite a bit of time until Google shows back the old URL instead. Would that be an issue, or do you pick it up fairly quickly?
We should pick it up fairly quickly, because we will see a link from the homepage of the website probably to that Black Friday page again. And then we can pick that up again and say, well, this is a new URL, or a URL that we've known before, but it's live again, and we should be able to pick that up fairly quickly.
And in terms of 301 versus 302, would that make any difference? Seeing as a temporary?
Probably not. No, probably not, because it's you're doing it over the course of several months, and then our systems would say, well, this is a temporary redirect that has been in place for several months, therefore it's more like a permanent one,
Right.
and we'll just treat it as a permanent one.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Maybe one last question from any of you, if there's still something on your mind that we need to talk about.
John, can I just ask a quick kind of Penguin-related question, which is that it's quite a big change of direction for Google to do the devaluing versus kind of penalizing approach with kind of link spam. Are there any plans to do something similar with Panda?
I don't have any specific answer for that, just offhand. So when it comes to low quality content, to things like keyword stuffing, we do try to take that approach already. So that's something that we've been doing for quite some time, in that when we see things that are clearly keyword stuffing, or where people kind of have like something that a lot of shops used to have, where you have a category page on top, and on bottom there's like this small tiny text part which lists like 12 Wikipedia articles about that product. Those are the kind of things that our algorithms are generally pretty good at picking up on and just ignoring. So that kind of ignoring aspect versus penalizing aspect, I think, is something that across the board for a lot of our algorithms is already happening.
But there are definitely still parts of Panda where the same punitive side is applying, where if Google thinks that someone has intentionally spammed, and sometimes they have, but sometimes they haven't, then there would still be a punitive side where even if the site cleaned up or, sorted itself out, that there would be an element of demotion that would still be applying for a period of time. And again, it was just, I think a lot of people really, really welcomed what Google did with Penguin. It's, it's a great idea, and the idea of not being guilty until proven innocent. And I think a lot of people also felt that some of the punitive side was quite disproportionate. Just again, whether or not that similar principle would be applying to Panda like in its entirety. So, it would simply, in a granular kind of way, if there was areas of sites that Google felt were a bit spammy, it would simply devalue them. The rest of the site wouldn't be penalized, because Panda is in many ways site-wide as well.
I think to a big extent we're already doing that. It's something where our algorithms try to take the appropriate approach based on the situation, the way that we can understand the situation. And the better we can understand the situation, the more we can kind of ignore that specific part that's problematic. Whereas if we just recognize that, oh, there's probably something really problematic here, and we're not sure that we can isolate it completely, then it might happen that the algorithms say, well, I will just stay on the safe side and demote some of this website because I can't isolate it. But if we can isolate it as much as possible, then ignoring that is usually, at least from my point of view, the better approach.
Okay, thanks.
All right. With that, let's take a break here. I'll add the next week's, or what is it, in 2 weeks always, the next Hangouts to the Google Plus page again. So if there are any questions that I didn't get to, and it looks like there are a bunch of them here, feel free to add them to the next Google Plus page, and we'll try to get to those as well. And in the meantime, thank you all for joining. Thank you all for all of the questions and the discussions. It's been really interesting again.
Thank you for all your answers.
Thank you. And I wish you all a great weekend in the meantime.
Thanks, John. You too.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Bye.